Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Peter Wolfgang. I am the president of Family Institute of Connecticut Action, and we stand in strong opposition to SJ 30, the amendment to recognize a right to kill an unborn child. We oppose SJ 30 for three reasons. Number one, because it's wrong. Abortion is killing. Our state constitution should not create or sustain a right to lethal violence against an innocent human life. Number two, it's not what people want. According to Gallup polls, 81% oppose abortion in the last trimester. 65% oppose abortion in the second trimester. Most people are not pro-choice on abortion all the way up to birth, which is what this resolution supports. Not only will pro-lifers oppose it, moderate pro-choicers will oppose it when they learn of its extremism. That's what this is, an extremist amendment. The extremism will backfire. It may even grow the pro-life movement in the state of Connecticut. Third, the resolution is so vague as to include and exclude anything a judge may want to interpret in it. It says reproductive freedom and autonomy, not the way I characterized it at the beginning, even though the way I characterized it, I think, is more accurate. Reproductive freedom and autonomy rather than abortion. Why not just say abortion? The phrase you chose instead is so vague that if we ever became a pro-life state, a judge could argue the other way around, especially with advances in science and technology that verify an unborn human is in fact a human being. How about that? Less than 3 minutes. But those are my main points. Number one, it's the taking of human life. Number two, it's an extremist amendment. Look, I know that this is a state that leans heavily in a pro-choice direction, but you have to break that down. What this amendment would do is it would legalize abortion all the way up to just a moment prior to birth. Most people are not on board with that. Most people who call themselves pro-choice are not on board with that. I think, I've heard earlier in this day, actually in another committee, committee chairman lamenting the possible overturning of Roe versus Wade this year. The reason why I think in part you're in that situation is because there was such an extreme law that was recently passed in New York. You remember they lit up the Empire State Building in celebration of it. People naturally recoil against that sort of barbarism. There are backlashes, there are effects, equal and opposite reactions. And I think you're going to see something similar if you make the mistake of passing this amendment into our state constitution. I strongly identify with the comments of my friend Dave Reynolds from the Catholic Conference, the things he said about how our highest legal document in the land should not enshrine abortion. It's such a divisive issue among the public. It's something that really belongs.
Your 3 minutes are now over.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfgang. Question, Senator Sands, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, Peter. Something you said, I just wanted to follow up with you, and that is that your third reason that you cited had to do with the language that is in this resolution. And I'm just curious, you said it could be interpreted in a pro-life way, and I'm just curious what you meant by that. Maybe you can elaborate.
Okay, so the language is, let me see if I have this right, reproductive freedom and autonomy. Well, let's assume for a moment, Senator Sampson, and this is why the pro-choice movement is in so much more political trouble today than they were a few years ago. This is why the polls have slowly been shifting in a pro-life direction, less so here in Connecticut, but overall nationally, that things have been moving in a pro-life direction. Why? Because of scientific progress, because an ultrasound today is far more advanced than an ultrasound in 1973 when the US Supreme Court first invented the license to abortion. What happens if the science continues to progress still further, where it becomes undeniable, where every last euphemism or Orwellian dodge for why it's okay to take the life of an unborn human child, that maybe it's a human life, but it's not a person, when all that falls away and it becomes so obvious that this is a human person and that we've snuffed out, unfortunately, over 60 million of them since Roe v. Wade, I think at that point, a judge could look at that phrase, reproductive freedom and autonomy, and say, well, it's been established beyond a scientific doubt that the unborn person is his own separate person. And so we have an amendment in our state constitution that says that people are entitled to their own autonomy, their own reproductive freedom and autonomy. And therefore, I'm going to read that amendment into creating a right to unborn human life in the state constitution, because you're violating the autonomy of what is now unmistakably a human person. I think that's a real possibility. Stranger things have happened. We really don't know what the future holds. And so, I would encourage my friends on the committee and the legislature, who I know do not yet share our belief in the sanctity of human life, the need to have a Connecticut where every unborn child is hopefully someday protected in law and welcomed in life. Even if you don't agree with us on that, this is extreme. I think even people who are pro-choice, and I know there are people all along the spectrum in Connecticut. I've been up at the state capitol for years. I've been involved in the process for years. I know there's a lot of good people who don't agree with me on the underlying issue of the sanctity of unborn human life, but nevertheless recoil against some of the more extreme measures that show up at the state capitol. Senator, this is the most extreme one yet.
Peter, thank you very much for that answer. I will tell you that I was struck by the language in the resolution also, simply because the words reproductive freedom to me do not really get to the heart of what I think the proponents are after anyway. That's like, slang term from the, pro-choice movement, rather than discussing the actual topic of abortion. To say reproductive freedom. I mean, reproduction is actually having a child, not an abortion. So I don't understand how that could be described as reproductive freedom. Obviously, this is a very, very difficult issue in any situation, and certainly it will be a difficult issue for this committee and this legislature. And you boiled it down that the struggle really is, and always has been, is when life begins. And that's, I think, what ultimately makes people struggle with their own position about whether they are 100% pro-life or they are pro-life in most cases, but they want to leave a little window at the beginning, or some people who fall on the other side of the spectrum, who don't see a life until birth. I don't know how you could come up with that. I think that while this might be a hard decision for me, if the bill was, or the resolution was written a little bit more fairly, I don't think it will be a difficult task for me to vote no against this, because it is extreme. And I think it does exactly what you said, which is that it would basically put abortion all the way up until birth, including the third trimester, which I think the vast majority of people are opposed to, into our Constitution. I just don't see that happening. And I also think it's a mistake on their behalf to try and push that with something that will have to be voted on by voters at the polls, as you mentioned. Do you have any information about how Connecticut would poll on something like that, and the likelihood of it passing?
That's the fascinating thing. Abortion opinion in the state of Connecticut is the dog that's not barking. Like Quinnipiac, I mean, we have UConn, we have, nationally respected polling firms here in the state of Connecticut that for some reason never poll on abortion. I'd love to know what the people of Connecticut think about parental notification, what they think about, any of these sort of midway measures that I think most pro-life and pro-choice people could find common ground on. I find it very curious that the polling companies in Connecticut will poll you on everything else under the sun, but they don't really seem that interested in what people in Connecticut think, not about the right to abortion overall, but about a lot of these gray areas where I think you might find a lot of common cause. That's a curious thing.
Thank you for that. I just have one more question through you, Mr. Chairman, and that is, and again, Peter, I don't expect you to be an expert on this bill since it's not your legislation. You're here in opposition. But one other thing that I've been thinking about is whether or not this resolution would interfere with other policies like parental notification, for example, which I am a year after year proponent of. I believe parental notification saves lives. I believe it catches bad people who are up to no good. And that's why I'm such a strong advocate. I'm wondering if this language would interfere with something like that in the future, because it could be perceived as interfering with an absolute reproductive freedom and autonomy, as is the words. I'm just curious if you got that same feeling about it.
Very much so. And this is the problem with approaching an issue this significant this way. When you write this right into the state constitution, this was the problem on the federal level with Roe v. Wade. It takes it out of the democratic process ultimately, where there's no room for compromise. There's no room for give and take. You know, I get a half a loaf, you get a half a loaf. We're not all going to get everything we want. But that's, you know, when you, like, if you had a situation where the state still has abortion rights, that's something that I, as a pro-lifer, would not accept. But if you had a situation where we're going to have parental notification, we're going to have these sort of midway things that people on both sides agree with, well, that's how you lessen social strife in this country. And I think whether it's the U.S. Supreme Court 49 years ago reaching down from on high and saying, we'll take this out of the democratic process, or the thing this committee may be beginning to do today, which is we're going to put this right into the Constitution and take away your right to pass parental notification, to pass things that the majority of people on both the pro-life and pro-choice side may agree on. What you're doing is you're taking an already divisive issue about human life and you're throwing grease on the fire. We just the other day, we had 2,000 people at the state capitol on a Wednesday. 2,000 people. It was the first ever Connecticut March for Life. It was a smashing success. And I mean, that's just where we're at now. If you do something like try to enshrine the most extreme possible abortion rights into our state constitution, such so that the midway measures that you're referencing are like taken out of the political process altogether, I think it would completely upend the political situation, legislative, otherwise, on abortion in the state of Connecticut. And really, with everything else going on in the world, in our own country, is this a time for us to be reaching for ways to become still more polarized? I'm more than happy to reach across to my friends on the other side of this issue who are pro-choice, who may agree with us on things like parental notification. Let's do that instead of doing this extremist amendment that really just kind of sets the whole thing on fire.
Thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate you being here today. You certainly do a great job advocating for your position. And I thank you for your time and those answers to the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just say one more thing too? Maybe Madam Administrator, if you don't mind correcting my name, you have me as Rob, R-O-P. And just so people watching understand, my name is Rob. And thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We're trying to get that fixed as soon as possible. Senator Flex, your hand is raised. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I just have a couple of questions about your organization, Mr. Wolfgang. How long has your organization existed?
Since 1989.
And how long have you worked there?
Oh gosh, since 2004. What's that? 18 years now.
Okay. And is your organization an organization that endorses candidates for public office?
Well, we have there's a legally separate political action committee, and they do that.
Okay. And are you a part of that work at all?
I am an advisor to them. That's it. It's of our organizations, it's the one I'm the least involved with.
Okay, but are you familiar with their endorsement process?
Yeah.
So when you first started, how many candidates did they endorse back in 2004? Do you have any recollection of that?
I don't.
Do you know how many candidates you endorsed in 2020?
Oh, I don't know. 25, 30 maybe?
And do you know how many were elected to the Connecticut General Assembly?
Not off the top of my head. I know that our we tend to do better than the Republican Party. A lot of times when we look at those stats, our win ratio tends to beat the GOP overall. That's something that's always been of interest to us because the Republican Party is split on this issue, and we're always trying to encourage them to move in a more pro-life direction. And I know in the Democratic Party, there may even be some movement on that, hopefully. So that's always of interest to us.
Okay, so in general, maybe in the last few years, you've had more success, is what you're saying?
I know that our ratio beats the Republican Party off the top of my head. I didn't look at those. That wasn't part of my preparation for testifying against an abortion amendment in our state constitution.
But this is a topic that your questionnaire covers when you're endorsing candidates, correct? Not this particular resolution, but the issue of abortion and abortion rights.
Only parental notification, in fact. So theoretically, to us, the difference between pro-life and pro-choice at this stage is, do you support overturning Roe versus Wade and restoring legal protection to the unborn? That question has never appeared on our questionnaire. We don't ask if you're pro-life or pro-choice because the Connecticut General Assembly has no power over the United States Supreme Court. So what we ask instead are things that are reasonable, that can reasonably be accomplished at the state legislature, very much along the lines of what I discussed with Rob, with Senator Sampson, is something like parental notification.
Thank you. So if the Supreme Court precedent is changed this year, your 2022 questionnaire might cover something different then?
It might. That would be a job for the committee. I only advise them. I don't make any of the decisions for the committee.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the answers to my questions, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Flex. Any further questions, comments for Mr. Wolfgang? Seeing none, thank you for being here today, sir. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.